Hello and welcome to Pokesports Plus, an extra podcast by Pokesports where we talk about and talk with people from all over the Pokemon community. I am Mike and I play with one Pokemon on the field.
I'm Kevin. I play with two Pokemon on the field.
And today we are joined by Eduardo Cunha. Eduardo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun.
Can you tell us a little bit about your competitive history? I know you've got a very impressive resume when it comes to competitive Pokemon.
Yeah, well, it all started back in 2013. I actually went to a national event in 2010, but I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't even get to play. I was stuck in line because the line was so big. They capped out before I could even enter. But I really started caring and knowing about stuff and, making research and all that in 2013, and my first event was 2014. However, I didn't really get a official result until 2016, where I started with a banger as I finished top 4 at Worlds.
That's a banger,
which was pretty insane. And from then on, I just kept on trying my best at and playing as much as I could. I started attending more events too, because before that I only really went to nationals once a year, and that was it. But I started going to regionals as well and more internationals when those started being held. And I ended up winning an international in 2019. Just got a finals at the same international a year later. And among with other finishes, I also top cut the worlds again last year. And just been trying to do my best, and now we're here.
Yeah, I was gonna say you've had a very good run at specifically Oceania International Championships in the past 2 years. Do you go and participate in other international championships?
Yeah, well, there's this whole thing we like to call snowball unofficially. There's basically with internationals, there's the system where they pay players to go to other internationals. I believe the what they try to do is they try to level up the kind of playing field they have at internationals. So the top 4 from each region gets a fully paid travel award, and the top 8 gets a stipend of $1,000 from each region before every international. And we call it snowball because it's very common for you to get more points by going to an international, right? And then you get invited because you get so many points. It's likely that you're gonna get another paid trip to the next one. So by going to the next one, you have another opportunity to gain. So it's just like everyone that starts on the snowball, very difficult. It's very difficult for them to leave the snowball because it's so easy to gain points out of those internationals. It's been better lately because now they cap the amount of points you get. It's not total points; it's just points between one international and the other. But what I'm trying to say is just that since 2018, I've been kind of on the snowball every year. So I attend like every international every year except the US one, because usually it's the last one. My season is basically over. I already have my pay. The past 2 years I already had the paid invite for Worlds, so I didn't really have to go there anyway. And I didn't get a stipend either for those, so I haven't gone there since 2018. But the other ones I always do. So
when you get your invites to things that you don't necessarily need to go to because you already have enough points or what have you, is there a point in going, do you think, or do you enjoy the practice going to professional tournaments like that, or how do you practice?
Yeah, it's always worth it, even if just like the prize money is still amazing. It's still like by itself the tournaments are still awesome, but we also have to take into account there it's money we're spending because it depends if you get the travel award or the stipend. And the stipend usually they only pay afterwards, so you're still at a loss for a while. So you have to invest there, and then you also have the whole you kind of get exhausted to go to like another continent and then play there, and it's a whole investment both emotionally and financially. And if it's not worth it, sometimes it's just better to stay at home, focus on other things, prepare for the big event, which is Worlds. But by itself, they're always worth it. Usually I prepare by playing. I play a lot of more best of one than I should probably, because most tournaments are best of three. But I like not being too dependent on other people, so I try to play on ladders, like on Pokemon Showdown and on the Battle Stadium, previously Battle Spot, and just get some, like, when I want to get a feel for a team, and when I'm good with the team, I try to get best of threes with friends.
Right.
So yeah, it's like at tournaments, like it's always good practice. I feel like it's probably the best practice you can get is at a tournament, because you're so focused that I feel like you absorb the information a lot better, and you go through situations that you probably normally wouldn't at home. So I feel like it's honestly great practice, but it's also a big investment. So not just financially, as I was saying. So it's good practice, but it's not just at home. You have to live to another continent. So
right, that's a whole taxing effort as well. Yeah, picking up and going to Australia to go and compete.
A lot of people don't realize this, but when you're in that tournament setting, it's almost like nothing else in the world matters, and it's it's a different experience than when you're on Battle Spot, and like, you'll be recording a Battle Spot video, and then someone will be like, "Oh, how come you didn't think about this play?" And it's like, "Oh, I'm trying to speak at the same time." It's like, it's a completely different experience.
Yeah, exactly. Like, sometimes I find myself streaming, and I don't even consider certain situations that at a tournament I obviously would have, because I'm like talking with people on stream. I'm looking at the chat. I'm trying to explain what I'm doing. I'm also like not nearly as focused. It's completely different. When you're in a tournament, it's just it's just like you said. Everything that matters is that tournament, and it's completely different. Yeah.
On the topic of streaming, now you've been streaming for what, a few months now? Is that correct? Yeah. It seems like you've kind of started to make a pivot into content creation. I've seen you streaming on Twitch. I've seen you putting videos out on your YouTube channel. Why the decision to transition into that?
So actually, I have to thank some of my best friends. They kind of gifted me with an Elgato in November. And I was already streaming a little bit of Showdown before. It's mostly because I just wanted to, put to use some of the knowledge I had on the game, and also to learn from other people. I thought it was amazing. I love playing the game, of course, and getting to use my having opportunities to play in other places and show my game while also interacting with other people is always something I'd appreciate. So I started doing something more casual with Showdown. But when my friends got me an Elgato, it was when I started really investing on streaming, because it's honestly been amazing. Because when you're playing alone, it's always fun and everything, but sharing certain things with not just friends but just like the community in general, it makes like it's so much more fun. Because sometimes you'll see something hilarious, like for example, when I started streaming, I faced like some guy had a Charizard and a Sableye, and I had a Rotom Heat, and I had a Gastrodon in the back. I switched into Gastrodon because I don't remember the board position, but it was the right play then, and I just protected my Rotom or something like that. And the dude goes for like Ring Dance with a Sableye and Max Geyser with Charizard, and I didn't even realize what the Max. We had to like think it was Weather Ball that transformed into Max Geyser, and the Gastrodon absorbed the Max Geyser because of Storm Drain, and it was. If I was playing alone, I would have no one would have even believed that happened. I got to show it to everyone, and there's a clip of me dying completely as I witnessed that. I couldn't stop laughing. The chat was going insane. It was hilarious, and having the opportunity to share this with other people is amazing, and it's a lot of fun. So yeah, I've been enjoying it. I have to thank my friends again for the Elgato, I've been loving it.
So they just kind of gave you that first initial push into the whole scene, really.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've been talking about on the topic of loving the game and loving what you do. Recently on Twitter, there's been a lot of discussion about Dynomax's position in VGC, which I'm not particularly sure where this spurred from, but I know that it's been a topic ever since the game came out. Doubles OU for Smogon, they just have taken it out. So I mean, now it's being looked at in VGC as well. What are your thoughts on Dynomax?
Every generation has kind of this quirky new mechanic that is supposed to spice up the game. And you know that's part of Pokemon is it's part of its identity now. So like it's understandable. We had the gems back in Gen 5. Now then we had Mega Evolutions and then Z moves, and now we have the Dynomax. And they all have its drawbacks, and they also have its potential benefits. And honestly, my problem with Dynomax is that it's just honestly, if we could like disable items when a Pokemon Dynamaxes, I think it would have been way better. Because I think what really pushes Dynamax to the edge of the broken is stuff like being able to use Scope Lens on Togekiss, for example. Because you know you're already using a super powerful move, and then one of the best ways to mitigate Dynamax is if you reduce their attack or special attack, you boost your defenses. And you know that strategies are weak to critical hits, but usually they only have 3 turns of Dynamax, so it's very unlikely that they'll crit during that. Usually it's weak to crits like throughout the game because you'll be attacked multiple times. But the max moves they only have 3 chances to crit, so the odds are on your favor. So you can mitigate the damage, go through that route. But against that Togekiss, you can't, because critical hits ignore any boosts or drops they give to you. So that kind of like goes against kind of the way we could control Dynamax. And then there's also weakness policy, which is an absurd abuse of the double HP Pokemon get. Because basically you're giving a boost for being hit by a neutral move, because it's no longer super effective now. They have twice the HP, so it's essentially neutral. And you know, you grab a Pokemon like Tyranitar that has so many weaknesses but is so bulky, you're gonna take no damage from super effective moves and get a huge boost. And it just feels so counterintuitive, because you kind of want to damage the Dynamax to knock it out, but at the same time, if you do that, you're boosting them. So you know, at least those you can mitigate, but it's a +2 boost. To mitigate, you need a lot more investment. And I feel like those push a little over the edge. Similar situation with Dragapult, but Dragapult has clear body, so you can't even intimidate, you can't even snarl, you can't even set up. You know, it's really hard. And I feel like those kind of like, if Dragapult is strong, but without a life or a weakness policy, it's way easier to deal with. Durant is obviously extremely strong, but only because it's also very frail. But without an item, you would miss out on a lot of key KOs. So I feel like if you couldn't have a life orb, things would have been much easier to deal with. So honestly, I feel like the key is disabling items the same way they disable like choice items when you think Dynamax. Doing the same thing for every item would fix a lot of things. Honestly, like obviously it's insane that a Pokemon gets stronger moves for 3 turns and gets the extra HP. But honestly, that's part of Pokemon, getting these quirks that spice up the game. That's Pokemon, and we are used to them. It's about adapting to them and understanding what they also how they also benefit the game, because they do. There's a lot of depth now, because we have to we can't just mindlessly target a Pokemon and expect a KO when there's the possibility of Dynamax. We have to think beyond that, and I appreciate that a lot about Dynamax, but there's still a bunch of things that weren't balanced very well in my opinion, and that kind of make the format much worse than it could have been.
That's an interesting point. And I like what you said too about Durant. I hadn't really thought about the fact that Durant is so popular these days, but I did actually see a post on Twitter the other day, actually just today. Kevin shared it with me just before this, listing just 2 Pokemon from every VGC season for the past 9 years. Have you seen this?
Yeah, I have. I was actually working on that too. I made my own tier list for previous
oh my gosh, nice.
I noticed that Durant and Dragapult were the representing Pokemon for them. I feel like Togekiss would represent better, but
right. And I was thinking that too, just why is it not Togekiss and Drag? Like those 2 are specifically what stands out in my mind as being the most popular of VGC 20 so far, if not. If this tier list was made at the very beginning of March, you would have expected like Incineroar and Togekiss. Basically, exactly. Those are the 2.
Yeah, exactly. Agreed. Yeah, but Durant, then again, like Duran is still so absurd and feels so much of a problem on the format too that I understand it being representative too.
Mm-hmm. I liked the distinction you made on Twitter today, saying that it reminds you of when we were first introduced to Mega Kangaskhan, except that went away over time because people knew how to deal with it. But now it's like there's so much stacked against the rest of the meta with Dynomax Togekiss and Crit Kiss specifically.
Yeah, I feel like it just got worse because in the beginning we didn't even realize Crit Kiss was a thing for the first month or so.
Yeah.
So it was actually way better before. But then we realized, wait, this is actually pretty broken because it crits 50% of the time.
Yeah,
and
right.
Dynomax, it's pretty dumb. And that's when things kind of got really bad. And with Kangaskhan, I think we realized right away that he was super strong. But then... people started realizing, I can run Rock Helmet and Mungus and really physically bulky, and if they want to target me, they take a lot of damage and I'll live any hit. I can run Intimidate. I can run, but like we didn't really realize because back then it was different too. The community wasn't as developed, and the information didn't travel as fast as now. Because the community was smaller too, and people didn't really realize how. To deal with Kangaskhan, and it was very slow process. Kangaskhan was still winning national events in April and May, but even though it wasn't doing as well, it was still winning events. But in Worlds, it got completely destroyed. Kangaskhan was nowhere to be seen. The best result was 14th place, and it was my friend Marcus, and he even said that it barely brought Kangaskhan at all the World Tournament. It was because he had another Mega, which is Mawile, that he even got the result. So Kangaskhan was completely gone, which is great to see because like it felt very overwhelming force, but it was possible to deal with very well. And you saw that when the best players in the world decided to really focus on how to beat it, and look at that, it's gone now. So it's kind of it eventually vanished, and I don't see Dynomax having that effect.
That's like a good definition of like a good meta, like a meta that doesn't appear the same after like the 8 months are done, right? Like
yeah, exactly.
We've been seeing Togekiss in every single tournament for every single month ever since, like the turn of the year. So it's not getting any better. It's gone down a little bit.
We've only seen it get stronger. Right?
Yeah, people just find new ways of using it.
Yeah, this is actually a very interesting. There's so much to talk about in Togekiss because in the format, something very interesting that I've noticed is that usually at tournaments you'll see like in top 8 like 7 Togekisses, and the one that wins the tournament is the one that doesn't have Togekiss. And I find that extremely interesting because Togekiss is like consistent, but there's that team that doesn't have it, that knows really how to beat it, that ends up winning. That happened in Oceania, for example. Like all the top 8 at Togekiss except Marco, and Marco won, which I find fascinating. But still, like there's so much to be said about Togekiss because then again, like. Crit Kiss is strong and all, but I can use super effective moves. If they're powerful enough, I'll be able to break through it before he gets all 3 attacks. And if he gets less than 3 attacks, the odds of getting meaningful critical hits are way lower. So there are ways to deal with Togekiss. But then if you use super effective moves and they turn out to be weakness policy, well, you kind of just did them a favor by attacking it. And then there's also the support Togekiss, which I actually used on the Champions Cup tournament. And that one is really good at dealing with Dynomax Togekiss because you can just yawn. And yawn is a fascinating way of stopping Dynomax because it gets way better distribution than other sleep moves, and it's 100% accurate. And even though it's not as good as, for example, sleep powdering it or sporing it right away, it's something that it doesn't miss, and a lot of solid Pokemon get it. You don't need to run a niche Pokemon to be able to pull off that move. So there's also that variant of Togekiss, and I feel like every Togekiss has very different counterplay. And in the best of 1 setting, it becomes really hard to make the right play because you have to cover for every set, and it gets to a point where that's not possible.
Right. I mean, in a best of 3, you can. It's basically a rock paper scissors when you're looking at Togekiss, where it's either got Babiri or weakness policy or scope lens, which is like all of those 3 items accomplish very different things if you're attacking into a Togekiss. You don't want to attack into a Togekiss that has a Babiri Berry because it's not going to take as much damage. You don't want to attack into a Togekiss that has a weakness policy because then it's going to do more damage.
Yeah.
You don't want to attack into or you do want to attack into a Togekiss that has Scope Lens, but then that's 1 in 3 situations where you actually want to attack into it. So
it also messes with speed tiers too, because all 3 Togekiss sets have very different speed tiers.
Yeah. Exactly. Sometimes even the same set has very different speeds. Like, for example, I like to use more of a slow crit kiss because I like to use it as a support too with Follow Me. But I have friends that prefer like max speed, so they outspeed Dragapult at +1. So there are even the same sets sometimes have very different EV spreads. And sometimes people were surprised by attacking to my Togekiss and seeing that it was actually extremely bulky, even though it was critting every time. But you never really know. Togekiss is so versatile; it's pretty insane.
Well, with that, you know what? Let's take a little break, and then when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about your joining with Spino Esports. I want to talk a little bit more about what kind of a world we're living in right now and what we're doing tournament-wise now that there isn't flying out to these places, and now that there isn't stipends and tournaments and all of that kind of stuff. Well, in-person tournaments anyway. We'll talk about that when we come back from the break.
I had no idea about snowballing. That's broken.
Yeah, me neither.
Essentially, when you just pass that threshold, you're like, okay, I fly wherever I'd like to.
Yeah, it got much better now. Well, debatably, because they kind of made a step forward and 2 back. Because the problem was the first people doing well at internationals basically had it guaranteed as long as they did if they went positive at the next international, because it gets so many points there. They're basically guaranteed to just get another stipend and then another stipend and then another stipend because you're going to the events. Because if I'm European, for example, before the first international was Europe. So if I'm European and I go to the first international because it's way cheaper to go to, I do well, and then I'm being paid to go to Australia, and I doubt anyone that isn't being paid would be going. So I'd be way ahead of the rest of the Europe. And I'll be getting points the rest of Europe wouldn't get. And I get ahead of them because of that. So I get another flight to Brazil now, which they won't go because then again, you're not going to Brazil if you're not paid to go to. And yeah, there's that wall effect, and it's pretty insane. But now they make seasons where basically they only count the points you get between internationals. So for example, the points you get for the third international are the points you won, or rather the stipends are decided by the points you won between the first and the second.
Oh, okay.
So if you and for the fourth, it's the second and the third. So anything they won before that or after that doesn't count.
So it's still incentivizing people to go out and participate in more than just internationals.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't get as much of a snowball. The problem is, so it stopped being snowball. It wasn't really applicable. Now we had another problem, which was they basically made locals broken because they made a best finish limit per season, which means between internationals was 6. You could go to 6 locals, and all of them would add up.
Oh, wow.
And that was a lot, because it's these periods are 2-3 months long. That means they're going to locals every weekend, basically.
Right.
Which is not doable, but you kind of have to, because there's going to be someone that is going to do that.
Oh, of course.
And for example, we had a point in Europe where, for example, for Berlin, which was the third international, was going to be the third international this month, a lot of the stipends were from people that didn't even go to internationals, and their best results at regionals was top 128. And they were ahead. For example, Eric Rios got top 8 at an international, and he still didn't have enough points to pass someone who didn't have any major results, because the locals just added up so much, and he didn't go to locals, so he was left behind.
Kind of understand why they did that. They wanted more top players to appear at locals, but they made it way too broken.
Yeah. I feel last year, what happened was it was 2, and then it was 2 per series. There was a bit of a loophole because there were more seasons. It's hard to explain, but there was a point where like you could get points for a series but not for worlds. It's a big mess, but it really got bad this year. So it's kind of like a blessing in disguise that he was canceled, because he was probably the most unfair we've had in a long time. Because most of the people getting stipends weren't even doing well. They were just winning their locals. That was it. Whereas people that were actually getting super good results were not catching up because they didn't have locals. They didn't happen to have locals where they live.
Welcome back to Pokesports Plus and our conversation with MeninoJardim, otherwise known as Eduardo Cunha. Eduardo, you joined Spino Esports in 2018. How did that go? Did they approach you? Did you approach them? What happened there?
So Spino was created by a friend of mine, and his goal was kind of just develop some scenes through his esports. So he wasn't expecting to gain too much out of it. Just he wanted to start something, to start working on it, and I started with him. So, I mean, I didn't start the company. He started the company, but he called me out. Like, he messaged me and he said, all right, hey, I have this project. Do you want in? And he was actually very professional about it. And then I was like, yeah, sure. Sounds fine. I can start and see where it goes. So they started off by helping me get to some events in the beginning. I managed to go to a regional and then to Brazil internationals. I think I only had a stipend and not a travel award, so they kind of helped me there a bit. Not with Brazil, but it helped me with the regionals. Like, I didn't pay anything for the regionals; they covered it all. And it really helped me to get my travel award to Oceania, which I ended up winning. So they ended up being a big help there, and we used to play have practice matches between the players involved, because I had other teammates in Spino, but eventually the CO had started having some, or basically our players started disconnecting a bit and stopped practicing together, and things got a bit slower. I was still fully invested, but I was basically the only player left, and now with this whole Corona mess, it's been way less active.
Right.
They basically support me, and it's nothing too huge yet, but we're working on developing the project too.
Right. I can imagine that this whole COVID situation has brought a lot of teams into kind of a strange space where they want to support their players, but they also, there isn't much out there right now. So I mean, what can they do? But I mean, I will say that in terms of tournaments, it's not like the community has slowed down, and instead they've kind of pivoted to a fully online landscape, including things like the Champions Cup and including things like the Coastal League. I do want to talk a little bit about those. Let's start with the Champions Cup. You being a member of the top 8, I believe you came in second. How did that whole thing run? How was that a smooth situation? What happened?
It actually was way better run than we all expected, because there was a lot of people. Amazing. It was the biggest tournament we've ever had in VGC. We had almost 1,500 people. That's amazing. They managed to run it beautifully, especially given the circumstances, and so they ended up dividing us in flights. One of the problems, people complaining, but was kind of hard to manage, was that only one loss or less was allowed for people that wanted to move on into Top Gun. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Usually in VGC we have kind of a policy where it's 2 losses, because obviously the game does have some variance, and usually we think that it's fair for people to have a shot at single elimination if they lost one game to being outplayed and one game due to luck. That's kind of an average we do. That's kind of how we describe the situation. So it's normal for us to have what we call X2 making Top Cut. In this case we had X1, which was a bit controversial, but it was hard to manage otherwise because we had a lot of people, and an X2 cut would have been a lot of people in a top cut, and would have been way harder to manage. That was kind of, I think, the only reshoot that really rose from the tournament. Everything else was smooth. Was a lot of fun. Oh, there was also another problem, but that's completely on Pokemon, because we don't have a spectator mode.
Right.
Even though, I mean, we have a spectator mode, but not for online, which kind of made live streaming the event way harder.
Yeah, we've been kind of looking into ways to do that as well, putting together our own tournaments. One of the things is to give the people listening a bit of a exposition here, is that you have to change around some settings to basically treat your internet as a local area network. So you have to connect to this separate server, and you have to get your Switch involved, and it's a whole thing. And unfortunately, the technology isn't quite there yet with the people who are making it. Generous as that is, sometimes those servers go down. And from what I understand, in the Champions Cup, exactly that happened. One of the servers went down during the streamed matches. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it wasn't mine, but I was waiting on that match to move on next. Like, I wasn't even able to connect to the servers at all, and I was doing everything right. That we even double checked. We have no idea why it didn't work. But this is definitely like not on their part, because there was literally nothing they could have done differently. It's just we tried to do LAN and it didn't work.
So what ended up happening, from what I remember, is you were streaming your side of it.
Yeah, exactly. We're kind of fortunate that like our top cut always had a player that could stream.
Yes.
So a few matches ended up not having the luck of having a player involved with a capture card, but a lot of them did, and we managed to live stream at least one game of semifinals, which was mine, and finals. We also got most of top 8, so at least we got that, and that's still amazing, because honestly,
Absolutely.
like with other tournaments, you usually don't even get that much, because they still managed to live stream a few of the games in the LAN mode, so that was nice. But usually we didn't even try that, so it was super nice.
That kind of seems like something that Pokemon should be implementing, especially right now, since we won't even have that LAN option at all.
Yeah, exactly.
I never really thought of that, by the way, what you were saying before, that the whole you can't lose more than one game, that doesn't really allow for luck.
Yeah.
Oh, not at all.
No, like, yeah, you can lose to RNG, every now and then, and just call that part of the game, because that is part of the game. Crits happen, paralyze happens, confusion happens, but when it's between that and losing out on potentially $5,000, like that feels a little worse.
Yeah, that's why we also like don't value individual wins as much as we value consistency. Like, for example, my last two big results were the second place at Oceania and now the second place in the Champions Cup, and people value that very highly. Whereas like in sports, in sports, for example, people value wins a lot more, like being the champion. Like, for example, if I tell someone outside of the game that I got second, that reaction is mostly, it's just, next time he'll get it, right? But in Pokemon, it's like we value consistency a lot, because there is some variance, there is the luck factor, and I mean, it's not as crazy as some card games, but it's still there. And I feel like we value, for example, 2 second places way more than like a win and maybe a top 32. That's why we also try to do the X2. Like, sometimes people do like tournaments like double elimination, right? And they think like you already lost once, so you're like even lucky to be in the tournament. But we actually go even further. We've had top cuts with 3 losses before.
Right.
Sometimes we do have that too. So yeah, the approach we have to the game ends up a little different, because we have to, because the goal of the tournament is to assess the best player in the room, supposedly, and it's important to make the selection accurate, and usually we feel like the X2 is the best way to do that.
And I mean, then on the topic of consistency, the most recently, I believe most recently for you was the Coastal League, week 1 of the Coastal League, where it was you against James Beck.
James Beck,
who did take the series off of you. But how do you take that? Because I get that you're very, you as well as the rest of the Pokemon community is very based on consistency and winning over time. So when you take a loss like that, what goes through your mind?
Honestly, like my reaction to losses depends a lot on how it goes. I feel like long back and forth games are way easier to take losses on, because first of all, they're more fun, right? It's more of a mental challenge, and you're playing a fun game. This is why you play Pokemon, is to analyze board positions and then go back and forth. That's the goal, and I don't feel as bad when those happen. But when we get unlucky, for example, we feel really bad because it's like we were robbed of a game. I mean, depends. Like sometimes we get unlucky and it was super early on. We don't even know what was going to happen, and it's still a best of 3. So if we get unlucky once and then we could lose hard on the second game, I mean, fair enough. But if it's like, for example, I was about to win the set and then I get fully paralyzed on a Pokemon, those can tend to be more frustrating. Throughout the years, I've learned of the best ways to deal with it. Something I always try to convey is that it's not your opponent's fault unless they're being pricks about it.
Right.
So never leash out on them. It's not them, it's the game. And I always try. Mostly just like I try to smile. I try to say it's not your fault. Thanks for the games. And as soon as I'm far away enough from the player, I'm allowed to be upset as I want. But it's not the player's fault, so no need to go there. But yeah, like as every competitor, I don't take losses easily. Right. Some more than others, but it really depends on the context. Usually, I actually like, depending. It's also like the time it lasts, like the time of the kind of the salt. The time it lasts kind of depends also. Like, for example, sometimes I'll be salty, like extremely salty and mad. I try not to convey that, but I'll be to myself, like really mad and myself. And like 5 minutes later, I'll be completely fine. Other times I'll need like a whole day to cool down. So it really depends, but I don't think you ever I don't think you ever feel glad that you lost.
Right.
It always stings. You learn to make it sting less, and you learn to convey that you're not stinging when you really are.
What losses would you consider to be like the worst kind of losses? Because like personally, I hate it when I get hacked, but I would prefer to get hacks than myself make a mistake, because then at least I know that's out of my control. Which would you prefer?
Yeah.
If you had to pick, I guess.
Well, my reactions, my reactions are that's a really good question. My reaction like depends not just in like quantity, but also in like kind of qualities. Like my reaction is very different because, for example, when I get unlucky, I'll get very frustrated at the game and I start doubting myself too a bit, but it's a slow process. And I'm like thinking over the game and thinking, could I really have done something different? And I try to think of something, but then I come back to the fact that I got unlucky and there's nothing I could do, but maybe there was. And I'm kind of on that loop. And when I get outplayed, I feel really bad at the moment, really bad, but it's more of a peak. And then when that's over, I'm really motivated to get better. I get kind of like this rush of motivation. Because it kind of shows that I'm still not there. I still have more to play. So I want to play and I want to show that I can improve and I can do better. So at the moment, I'd say like getting outplayed feels worse. But it lasts less time because I realized that I have room to improve. The other, I just like thinking, was it really my fault? Was it really the hack's fault? And I just stuck there.
At least when it's your fault, you have something to learn from. Versus if it's hacks, you have absolutely nothing to learn from. You're just like, okay, I guess I'll get luckier next time.
And I feel too like the mark of a seasoned competitor is a person who will look back on what they've been doing and say not only, is there something that I could have done better, but also recognize what those things are, and then recognize what was completely out of your control. Because I'm sure the people who are very top level, much like yourself, they make less mistakes than the people who are just starting out or amateur or semi-pro or anything like that. But to be at the point where you're making less mistakes and noticing when you do, I think is the mark of someone who's really good.
I think that's kind of where the moment I started doing that was when I felt like I started really improving. Was when I stopped, because it's very different to say that you lost because of luck or saying that you lost with luck. Because if you say it's because of luck, it's just like you couldn't have, it's say that like you're attributing the fall to luck, and you're just saying I couldn't have done anything else, when sometimes you can. Like, to get into that position, it's very likely that before you could have played better. But it's different to say that like I probably should have won. I also could have played better. I'm upset that I got unlucky, but I don't fully blame it. And I think that's kind of an important shift. Like, I felt like when I was starting, I did more of the other of blaming the luck. But now I try to it's more of it has to be a mix. It has to be, you have to be upset that you got unlucky, because it's impossible. It's humanly impossible not to be upset when you get unlucky. But you also have to understand that there were plays you could have done different. And I'm usually becomes more upset at myself that I put myself in that position. And it's important to analyze that. And I think that's a very important process in a Pokemon player to be able to develop into a better player.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, as you're mentioning that. I'm thinking like, yeah, it is like Pokemon is a game that has crits and paras and confusion, but it's also important to note that you can build a Pokemon that can take that, and you can build and create a situation where if you do get paralyzed, then that's not going to affect you as much.
Making the best out of a bad situation. Yeah,
exactly.
And then Pokemon is, after all, a game of odds management. Something I like to say sometimes is that Pokemon is a great life lesson, because much like Pokemon, life is about odds management. You're never really 100% safe. You just want to improve your odds. And I feel like sometimes people get very unlucky, but it's because like they didn't maximize their odds. And I feel like if you don't maximize your odds, it's not as legitimate to be upset about the luck, because you could have definitely improved your odds. Like, for example, if you can make an end game come down to hitting a 90% accurate move or hitting a 95% accurate move,
right?
You should have gone for the 95. And sometimes noticing that the 95 was possible is the difficult part, and people forget and or don't even think about it. But like, those are big differences, and you missed the 90 even if you missed the 90, not a 95, and you could have if you missed the 95, then I'd understand. Right. It was a 90. There's always those details. So like, there's always something better they can do. It's very hard to guarantee anything, but you can improve your odds.
That's probably the best definition of Pokemon that I've heard in a long time. It's an odds management game. I've always considered it like a card game, but odds management just like takes the cake.
If there are any people who are new to Pokemon and are not able to go to any locals or any regionals because of this whole situation that's going on right now, what would you suggest to get people understanding the game in kind of a deeper way?
Myself included, like a lot of players, before they even if there were any events, like, because when I was starting, there were events, and I was still developing myself if I thought I wasn't going. It's like there's always a big online community that you can focus on. There's Pokemon Showdown, where you can ladder, you can play best of ones against people around the world, and just playing really teaches you a lot. Like, practice really is the key, and that's an amazing way. And you're also like kind of competing at the same time for the first place on the ladder. or maybe just the top 500. You're always like trying to accomplish something, and you have a way to see how your development is going, like to assess how much you're improving. So you have Battle Stadium, you have Pokemon Showdown, and then there are some tournaments. Like in the past month, we've had tournaments like every weekend, and money tournaments too. You pay an entry fee of anything going from $5 to $10. And sometimes the prizes are amazing. For example, the winner got $5,000 on this Champions Cup,
right?
And you don't even have to play for the prizes. It's just like an added kind of bonus that you have there. You play guaranteed. Like we play guaranteed 9 games because it was 9 rounds of Swiss. It's not single elimination. It's not double elimination. You get to play a lot and against a lot of people, and you learn a lot from it. So I definitely recommend that. I honestly started like people in my view on the community, like the view people had on me was that I was kind of a ladder hero when I started, because I played ladder all the time, and I spent so much time online because I didn't have events. We started having locals eventually, but even then it wasn't that much. No one in the community really valued a first place in Portugal local. They don't even know anyone from Portugal. They don't even know what Portugal is. and so obviously they're not going to value my result there. So I kind of like had to build a name for myself through online, and I had the tools to do that because people were already considering me a solid player before I even had an accomplishment. So that there are many ways for you to learn, play, have fun, and maybe even win money. We usually, the VGC community centers a lot around Twitter, which is I'm not a big fan of, but because we kind of used Twitter a lot because it was very convenient for sharing tournament results. And when our main website kind of stopped working because it was hacked, which was Nugget Bridge, we just resorted to our secondary social media, which was Twitter, and now we're all there. Like we've tried to create forums and other websites that it never sticks, and people just prefer Twitter now. So follow some people on Twitter. The main players, you have Wolf has been creating amazing content that you can follow. James Pack, Cybertron, so many people. And usually, like if you follow people that they follow or that they retweet, you'll be like aware of all that happens in the community,
right?
And it's very easy to keep up if you follow the right people. So yeah, there's that. If you want to keep in touch, know which tournaments are going on. We also use Discord a lot, so if you join the right servers, it's also a solid way to be on track to know what's going on.
Just being active in the community is important. Yeah. Final question. This is probably a given, but I play with 1 Pokemon on the field. I'm a singles guy. Kevin plays with 2 Pokemon on the field. How many Pokemon do you play with on the field?
I play with 2.
There you go.
I used to play singles. I started with singles. I think everyone did. It's very rare to see someone start with doubles, but I still play singles sometimes. But yeah, doubles kind of has my heart now. So
there it is. And with that, that has been our conversation. Edu, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. This has been an amazing conversation. Where can people find you?
Thank you very much for having me. You can find me on Twitter, MeninoJardim. You can find me on EMBC PT on Twitch or EMBC on YouTube. If you want to chat, if you have any questions, feel free to DM me on Twitter, and I usually try to answer all questions I get. So
you can also probably find him on a Play Pokemon stream because he tends to top cut every time.
Just keep watching the streams. He'll be there eventually. Kevin, where can people find you?
X-Rays Ovation, Twitter and Instagram.
And of course, you can find me at StillJustMike on Twitter and Instagram. You can find Pokesports wherever you find stuff, either at Pokesports Pod on Twitter or Pokesports Podcast on Instagram, YouTube, and Patreon. Pokesports actually just on YouTube. With that, again, thank you so much, Edu. Everybody, we will see you next week for another episode of Pokesports Plus. Have a good one.
Later, guys.
Stay safe.